Millions of fans watched the Buffalo Bills reach four consecutive Super Bowls between 1991 and 1994, a run of championship game appearances no other franchise in NFL history has ever matched. They lost every single one. No team has ever come that close, that many times, and walked away with nothing. That failure became its own kind of legacy, and the men who lived through it paid for it in ways no scoreboard ever recorded. A kicker who became a national punchline overnight. A quarterback who beat cancer four separate times. Two Hall of Famers who now compare notes on the same brain symptoms. This is where the Buffalo Bills of the early 1990s really ended up. One is the kicker whose single missed field goal became one of the most replayed, most agonized over moments in Super Bowl history, and whose life afterward became a quiet lesson in how a person survives being turned into a national punchline. Scott Norwood spent 7 seasons in Buffalo, earning an All-Pro selection in 1988 with 32 field goals on 37 attempts, and helping the Bills reach the postseason 4 straight years before that single kick came to define his entire career in the public mind. Born in Alexandria, Virginia in 1960, Norwood walked onto Super Bowl 25's final drive with a chance to win the game outright, a 47-yard attempt with 8 seconds left against the New York Giants, a kick just inside his career range, but far from a routine one. The kick sailed wide right. Buffalo lost 20-19, the closest margin in Super Bowl history at the time, and Norwood spent the flight home absorbing a kind of scrutiny that few athletes in that era ever experienced. His miss becoming shorthand for failure on a national scale almost overnight, referenced in movies and comedy sketches for years afterward. He played one more season in Buffalo, converting every kick he attempted in Super Bowl 26 the following year in another losing effort, before being released in 1992, and no other NFL team ever called. He and his wife Kim moved back to Virginia, where he ran an upscale landscaping business and later sold insurance and financial products, raising 3 children largely out of the public eye in the Centerville area. When Sports Illustrated caught up with him 13 years later, Norwood said plainly that he had never become suicidal or paralyzed by the moment, insisting that everyone gets one shot at these things and you simply have to live with how it goes. Norwood is alive today, in his mid-60s, still living quietly in the Virginia suburbs where he grew up, occasionally signing autographs for fans who, decades later, still bring up the kick before anything else. Norwood spent 7 seasons making the kicks nobody remembers because they mattered less. Scott Norwood has spent every year since proving that the measure of a man isn't his worst 8 seconds, even when the rest of the country spent decades insisting otherwise. 2 is the quarterback who led Buffalo to all 4 of those losing Super Bowls, and who has since said publicly that beating cancer felt easier than losing 4 championships in a row ever did. Jim Kelly threw for over 35,000 yards across 11 seasons in Buffalo, a Hall of Fame quarterback known for running the K-gun no-huddle offense that terrorized defenses throughout the early 1990s. Born in East Brady, Pennsylvania in 1960, Kelly starred at the University of Miami before beginning his professional career in the USFL and eventually becoming the face of Buffalo's dynasty. His personal life carried its own tragedy well before his football legacy was ever threatened. His son Hunter was born in 1997 with Crab disease, a rare and fatal genetic disorder, and died in 2005 at age 8, a loss Kelly has said prepared him more than anything else for what came next. In June of 2013, Kelly was diagnosed with squamous cell carcinoma in his upper jaw. Surgeons removed part of his jaw, the roof of his mouth, and numerous teeth. The cancer returned in 2014, then again in 2018, requiring a 12-hour surgery to reconstruct his jaw using bone and blood vessels taken from his own leg. Kelly has said, with characteristic bluntness, that he may have lost 4 Super Bowls, but he has now beaten cancer 4 separate times. In the spring of 2026, Kelly revealed he had also suffered a stroke, telling reporters at the opening of Buffalo's new stadium that he still felt really good despite it. He is alive today, in his mid-60s, his speech permanently altered by years of jaw reconstruction, still a constant presence at Bills games, and in Buffalo's charitable community. Kelly authorized some of the most explosive offenses in NFL history without ever getting the ring to show for it. Jim Kelly has spent the 3 decades since proving that surviving 4 cancer diagnoses and the death of his own son requires a different kind of toughness than anything 4 Super Bowls ever demanded of him. Tell me in the comments if Kelly's story is the one that hit you hardest, because the next 2 names on this list have spent years comparing notes on the exact same symptoms. 3 is the running back who became the engine of Buffalo's offense and who eventually became one of the most outspoken former players in football on the subject of what the game had quietly done to his brain. Thurman Thomas won the 1991 NFL MVP award and is the only player in league history to lead the NFL in yards from scrimmage for 4 consecutive seasons. A workhorse who became the emotional and statistical center of Buffalo's entire offense, across an era defined as much by his versatility catching passes out of the backfield as by his power running between the tackles. Born in Houston, Texas in 1966, Thomas starred at Oklahoma State alongside future Hall of Famer Barry Sanders before Buffalo made him a second-round pick in 1988, teams having passed him over amid concerns about a college knee injury that never once slowed him down across a 13-year career. He retired in 2000 having rushed for over 12,000 yards and was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2007, delivering an induction speech that focused heavily on the teammates who had carried him through 4 championship losses without ever once turning on each other. In 2016, Thomas revealed publicly that he had been living with concussion-related symptoms for years, including uncontrollable mood swings, an inability to focus for long stretches, and fears about depression and suicidal thinking that he described as consistent with chronic traumatic encephalopathy. He told a Concussion Summit audience in Niagara that he still has days where he has to apologize to his own family for outbursts he cannot fully control, and that the condition has affected his relationship with his youngest daughter as much as it has affected him. Thomas has since become an advocate for improved concussion protocols and mental health resources for former players, building a successful post-football business career alongside teammate Bruce Smith. Even while speaking candidly about his ongoing struggles in public forums, most former athletes of his generation still avoid. He is alive today in his late 50s, one of the most visible former players, willing to describe exactly what all those hits actually cost him. Thomas carried the ball more times than nearly any running back of his generation. Thurman Thomas has spent the years since carrying a different, invisible weight instead, one he has chosen to describe out loud so other retired players don't have to carry theirs in silence. 4 is the receiver whose sure hands helped define an entire era of Buffalo football, and who was the first teammate to publicly confirm that Thurman Thomas's symptoms were not an isolated story. Andre Reed caught 951 passes across 16 seasons, the vast majority of them in Buffalo, becoming a 7-time Pro Bowler and a key target in the no-huddle offense that carried the Bills to 4 straight Super Bowls, forming a nearly telepathic connection with Jim Kelly that lasted the entire era. Born in Allentown, Pennsylvania in 1964, Reed was a 4th-round pick out of Kutztown University in the same 1985 draft class that brought Bruce Smith to Buffalo, and he was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2014 after several years as a finalist. Shortly after Thomas went public with his own concussion symptoms in 2016, Reed told Sports Illustrated that he was experiencing mood swings of his own, perhaps not as severe as what his old teammate was describing, but present all the same, adding that a man doesn't say something like that just because someone else did first. Unlike some of his teammates, Reed has kept the details of his ongoing health largely private since that interview, focusing his public life instead on broadcasting, coaching high school football in the Buffalo area, and appearing regularly at team alumni events. He is alive today, in his early 60s, still closely tied to the Bills organization and to the same small circle of teammates who shared both the losses and, it turned out, the same lingering symptoms afterward. Reed hauled in more receptions than nearly anyone to ever wear a Buffalo uniform. Andre Reed's quiet confirmation that he felt what Thomas felt turned one man's difficult admission into proof that an entire offense had been carrying the same weight all along. 5 is the defensive end who became the most feared pass rusher of his generation, and who left the game with a record no one has come close to since. Bruce Smith recorded 200 career sacks, still the NFL's all-time record, first overall pick in the 1985 draft, and a two-time Defensive Player of the Year who anchored Buffalo's defense through all 4 Super Bowl runs. Born in Norfolk, Virginia in 1963, Smith arrived in the league with famously poor conditioning habits before a turnaround inspired by teammate Darryl Talley, and his future wife transformed him into one of the most dominant defenders the sport has ever produced. He was released by Buffalo in an emergency salary cap purge after the 1999 season, alongside teammates Thurman Thomas and Andre Reed on the very same day, closing out the Bills dynasty all at once. Smith finished his career with 4 more seasons in Washington, breaking Reggie White's all-time sacks record in 2003 before retiring at 40, and was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in his first year of eligibility in 2009. After football, Smith built a career as a hotel developer in Virginia, converting a former budget motel into a full-service Hilton property, and later partnered with Thomas to launch an energy consulting business, connecting the 2 former teammates in a second career neither man's playing days ever prepared them for. He is alive today, in his early 60s, one of the most successful businessmen among his entire championship-era roster. Smith terrorized opposing quarterbacks for 19 seasons, using a combination of speed and power nobody else at his position could match. Bruce Smith walked away from football with the most sacks in NFL history and somehow still needed a hotel renovation and an energy startup to feel like his second act was complete. If you've made it this far, hit subscribe, because the coach who guided all 4 of those losing Super Bowl runs just celebrated a milestone almost nobody in this sport ever reaches. 6 is the head coach whose calm, literate leadership took Buffalo to 4 consecutive Super Bowls, and who has now outlived nearly every rival, colleague, and record anyone thought was worth comparing him to. Marv Levy coached the Bills for 11 seasons, compiling a record of 123-78 and becoming the only head coach in NFL history to lead a team to 4 straight Super Bowl appearances. Born in Chicago in 1925, Levy served in the U.S. Army Air Forces during World War II before earning a master's degree in English history from Harvard, an unusual academic pedigree in a coaching profession built on football lifers. And he brought that same intellectual rigor to a Bills locker room that credited him with holding together a roster that lost the biggest games of their lives 4 years running without ever fracturing. He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2001 and returned to Buffalo's front office as general manager for the 2006 and 2007 seasons well into his 80s. In July of 2026, Marv Levy turned 100 years old, and Buffalo's alumni, including Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Bruce Smith, and Andre Reed, recorded video messages to celebrate the milestone, the same 4 men whose entire careers had once been built inside a system. Levy is alive today, the oldest living Hall of Fame head coach in NFL history, having watched the players he once coached grow old themselves while he simply kept going. Levy built a team that came closer to sustained championship success than almost any coach in the sport's history, 4 times over. Marv Levy is still here today, having quietly outlasted the very disappointment his own Super Bowl record was supposed to define him by. They rest in nothing but memory so far, because every man on this list is still alive today. A rarity for any dynasty this show has covered. 1 still runs a quiet insurance office in Virginia. 2 compare notes on symptoms neither one asked for. 1 built hotels out of a record nobody has matched since. And 1 just turned 100 years old, having coached all of them through the closest a team can come to everything. 4 separate times, without ever once getting to keep it. The Buffalo Bills never got their ring, and 30 years later, the story that actually survived was never really about the 4 games they lost at all.